So the first thing you gotta do is put on Journey featuring Chrono's quartet. Then you have to sigh. You have to be like, Then you have to use cliched breakup lines, like, what we used to have was special, but lately I've been thinking about other games. You used to always be there for me at my lowest points, and I feel awful doing this over text, but it's the best way for me to get my thoughts out as clearly and concise and make sure I don't make any... Wait a second. Why does every video on my YouTube feed sound like this right now? Hey, friends. Hey, get your hand off that playback speed button. We're gonna get rolling at breakneck speed. So, I did the generic breakup intro, that's what every video on my feed sounds like lately, and as grim as the state of the game is perceived to be right now, I don't think it's the fabled make or break moment because there isn't enough competition. There still isn't. I mean, we have Borderlands and Warframe, sure, but those aren't Destiny enough. The real make or break moment is if Marathon and Renegades fail simultaneously. Let's keep it rolling, we got a lot to cover. So as just a generic disclaimer, that's probably going to span most of the video, Destiny muddies its identity in an attempt to cater to different groups at different times of the year at the inevitable expense of other groups. Unintentional or not, this leads to overall larger buy-in for the player population despite wavering player satisfaction that brings in and pushes away different and new generations of Destiny groups on almost a yearly cycle. Every season, a new generation of Destiny players learn what Destiny specifically means to them. From there on, that's one more generation that Bungie has to juggle demands from. Because of Destiny's perpetual identity crisis, no matter what I say, I'll anger a substantial portion of the player base. There are easily 10 plus player archetypes at odds with one another in the game. In general, I advocate against my own in-game preferences in favor of community sentiment that I believe has the greatest chance to bolster the population numbers. In terms of opinions, I've learned to answer for feedback in all four of the following ways combined, kind of like a politician. This is what I think the best move is for population numbers. That's number one. Number two, here is feedback from an expert point of view. Novices might become experts in the future, so do with this as you will, but always defer to boosting the population. Number three, this is my personal opinion on the matter. I'm only really mentioning this so you can build a profile on what kind of player I am. Number four, emphasis on potential critical failure points that seem to stem from conflicting ideas being forced onto the game in the exact same space. Sometimes it feels like the devs need to gather enough ammunition to break through the toxic positivity cycle that has already doomed many games. Not going to go into that. Also, content creators are not solely to blame. Regular players are drafted for both feedback summits and playtest. If Bungie really listened to content... Alright, let editing Cammy just interject right here. I'm not part of the creator program. I opted out. This is from the heart. This is real. Insert generic salty comment villainizing content creator. If Bungie really listened to content creators, in PvE we'd have Borderlands-style shiny loot chases, robust gambling crafting systems to guarantee a desired playstyle for the cost of a lot of full game investment, and truly intrinsic replayable content with a suite of difficulty options allowing for both power fantasy and contest experiences alike. We'd have clan housing and sparrow racing by now. In PvP, we'd have a separate game at this point. Destiny, the Golden Age Arena, fit with an advanced Forge mode, a Fiesta party playlist where chaos ensues, and a competitive mode where the game is fine-tuned to feel dynamic despite climbing the skill ladder. Success here ties back to the PvE version of the game with cosmetics and so forth. I promise you content creators don't have a secret evil meeting set on adding more microtransactions, time gates, and convolution to game systems. They aren't here giving pointers on how to make the new player experience worse. Let's put the lens back on Bungie and the community. We're listening. That's kind of obfuscating the truth, if I said that word correctly. They're, in fact, listening, but what the hell are they supposed to do with conflicting feedback? A while ago, I did a viewer and Twitter poll on various divisive Destiny topics. The results were hilarious, with close to 50% for most of the answers. In all seriousness, I firmly believe that feedback doesn't matter at all when it's up to Bungie to finally pick a direction and just go. But time and time again, like recently, they pump the brakes and hit reverse back to the starting point, or worse. All that does is reinforce that loud, visceral complaining gets results, and they're guaranteed to infuriate 50% of the player base at any turn. In my opinion, I wish Bungie would pick a direction and go, disregarding feedback externally and tripling down on shattering a culture of toxic positivity internally. At the end of the day, they'll make the game they want to make. While I'm on the topic, I think we should go back to the old motto. We make games we want to play. And if I and others don't like the game, that's fine, we'll play something else. But for the players who like the game, they'll for once love the game with fewer compromises. Where listening doesn't also mean we're correctly interpreting. While the player could be to blame for not saying what they really mean, the developers are equally or more to blame for creating an illusion the player often doesn't realize they're living in. A good common example of this is when Destiny players say they want a grind, when what they really want is they want to gamble. The same players complaining about an arbitrary grind for tier 5 loot are the same players that farm the most boring encounters imaginable for a 1 out of 500 chance at a competitive weapon roll that they might not even utilize enough in the endgame to justify the time spent to upgrade. I'm not defending the new system, but it actually gives better odds to leave a season with more god rolls than the previous season. This is especially true if you realize that tier 1 gear is functionally competitive with the right roll, and it can drop on the way to 451 power. All this to say that although this player demographic has proven that they willingly put themselves through a bad experience to gamble if the loot is immediately enticing enough, keyword immediate, the player will only care about the absolute best and nothing in between when it comes to gambling. They might not admit it, but I suspect they'd rather spend 500 hours shooting into a loot cave where at any point they could get the best god rolls than to spend 100 hours slap leveling in the portal to then spend 5 hours shooting in a loot cave to get that same god roll, but faster. The key takeaway is that when this player demographic says we want more of a grind, what they effectively mean is we want Bungie to make loot more enticing and random like Borderlands, which puts Bungie in an interesting predicament where they have to weigh different forms of sunsetting to not risk too much power creep trivializing content because otherwise the player wouldn't want the loot to begin with. The power creep is so bad right now that functionally you don't even need guns. You can run some of the hardest content in the game, abilities only. But some of these players also want a conflicting wish of keeping their previously owned weapons functionally competitive, which can lead to the impending power creep. PvP players are especially vocal here since certain gun rolls quite literally define and enable a fun playstyle. If sunsetting robbed them of that role without an immediate replacement, I could see them quitting the game. For what it's worth, I do think Bungie had some great ideas for side grades and alternative weapon ideas. However, some overtuned loot slipped through the cracks and made power creep untenable for as long as it should have held the illusion glue together. Back on topic, do you see how any forms of feedback all essentially ask Bungie to come to the same few conclusions? Either create a better illusion or separate the sandboxes and games. The real downward spiral of the game is that the illusion inevitably gets weaker the longer the game exists from being perpetually solved. So the devs have to get more and more creative, which doesn't seem realistic to keep on going this long. The most obvious illusion was to put a 3 on the box and force a hard sunset. Perhaps do it one better and fully commit to the Diablostiny or World of Destiny craft that they keep flip-flopping on over the years. Like, just make the game that way if you want the game to be that way. Stop these half measures. The portal, in my opinion, was a failed illusion. My own portal feedback can pretty much be summarized by Esoteric's video. Advocating for the community, I think the portal is a failure to hobbyists, but a small success to the newer and more casual Destiny fans. If it does stay, it needs to streamline that 15 minutes to play on my lunch break vibe while removing its necessity to progress in the game. I personally don't think the portal was all bad since it, for the first time ever, gives us contest deltas for the other 350 days of the year when we don't have a contest raid or dungeon. Obviously, like the ESO video goes into detail, I wish I could separate trash modifiers from the power deltas, and Bungie has mentioned that they're planning on that. You're going to see that my theme for feedback in this video is advocating for a new illusion for Destiny. Just putting a 3 on the box would be the illusion some players need to start appreciating more of the good and less hyperfixation on the bad. It would also give old players who quit a reason to be curious again. And there are things to be curious about. We got the best raid and a host of some of the most interesting sandbox changes in a long time, which to some is the game itself. And for whatever reason, players are tunnel vision on an effectively meaningless portal grind when they could have been intrinsically enjoying the game on their way up to tier 5 loot, which is also effectively meaningless for all but contest raiders, speedrunners, trial sherpas, and comp grinders. The saddest part of the illusion breaking, leading to worse community sentiment, is that Bungie's attempt to bet the house on the portal illusion seems to have come at the expense of, in my opinion, the real replayable part of Destiny 2 that other shooters just can't seem to beat at Destiny's own niche. Yes, I'm talking about PvP. But PvP isn't free from illusions either. We have experiential FOMO every other week, with new time gate gear, seasonal artifacts, sandbox updates, and suspiciously timed bugs. Most PvP players need these interferences to force them to change their playstyle out of their own will and volition, an illusion you could say. While I personally dislike PvP being flavor of the annoying week, it does get results in keeping boring players varied for their own sake. Unfortunately, I see through the illusion. 10 weeks of different annoyances to me is still 10 weeks of annoyances. The reason I still stick around is that I basically hit Grandmaster status so I can afford myself the luxury to competitively deviate from whatever the flavor of the week is and run whatever appropriate aesthetic choice gets the job done. Whatever hoops I have to jump through this week to get a gunfight is just a trade-off for a bigger player population. This illusion helps bolster that population. Boredom is why I suspect the middle bracket of PvPers leave. This is basically how I've always approached the game. Personal opinion now. If there was ever a game that had Destiny DNA without the live service illusion slop, I'd immediately hop ship and grind that PvP game instead. Unfortunately, Marathon's genre creates a different illusion that I'm also not a fan of, so I'll have to wait if a Destiny PvP standalone game exists, if ever. Otherwise, I'll do the next best thing and continue to play Destiny PvP till the wheels fall off. The population has fallen enough that I notice a lot of unplayable PvP lobbies, but high-key, the map pool and power ammo systems contribute to more port games more than connection. So it's not that I don't still want to play, it's that I cannot sometimes. I have to wait until peak hours to find the right conditions to have a net enjoyable play session. To be clear, I don't consider a good play session dropping 50 bombs on repeat. I like when the game state is dynamic and I have opportunities to do cool things even if I don't land them or win the match. Modern matchmaking and game balance makes these opportunities way more scarce than they should be. I said the phrase net enjoyable, which kind of reminds me of Bungie's balancing slogan, net fun. Essentially, the player needs to have more positive feelings by enjoying using something more than the negative feelings associated with dying to that same thing. I'm too deep in the weeds to appropriately give feedback on this one, but I'm curious about what the middle PvP bracket thinks since they're so overwhelmed by Destiny's sandbox, almost every death is too much of a mystery to even worry about. Me, on the other hand, I see an Atheros Embrace loadout and basically am forced to swap to a glaive, and I have to block, as the only realistic way to prevent a random death. Another example is Cryosthesia and Diamond Lances. I'm practically their biggest op. With the way that teams are lobby balanced, I have no earthly clue what to do to avoid being frozen from my team's misplays. I struggle to fathom how this fits into the net fun balancing scheme, but like I said, I'm really too far gone in PvP to feel that this feedback is meaningful, just a little side tangent for my commuters to enjoy. The next topic is the new player experience. While some would say the new player onboarding system is one of the worst gaming has to offer, I don't think it's the number one priority to get right now. First of all, Bungie will likely be overhauling many game-led systems, so they'd have to redesign onboarding to reflect the new changes. I do believe the Star Wars collab episode, you know what, we're going to call them seasons. I do believe the Star Wars collab season will be a draw to new players, so I'd imagine the devs are crunching like crazy to hit the obvious deadline for both a system overhaul and new player onboarding to go alongside it so that they can enjoy the Star Wars season. We can all sense the desperation from Bungie with the recent flip-flopping on progression systems. It wouldn't surprise me if we see the classic break glass in case of typical suspects like Black Shaders, Nostalgia Bait, Sparrow Pod Racing, Pantheon 2 for FOMO rewards, Ludopaloozas, and intentionally crafting bugs. In the past, Bungie has described their job as upgrading an airplane while the airplane is already in the air. With their budget and manpower spread to other projects, I'm suspicious that they might not have the funds, creative or monetary-wise, to dig out of the design debt they've found themselves in, unless the other projects yield commercial success. I'm not counting out Marathon at all, considering the amount of feedback given to it with its edge on the console market. It can also achieve wider success by nailing its X factor to distinguish itself from others in the same genre. But on the other hand, Marathon is seen as damaged goods by the greater gamesphere due to an art scandal and Bungie's poor response to it. So speculating here, if Marathon also fails, then what exactly does life support look like for Destiny? Is it gonna maintain like Destiny 1? Is it gonna fizzle out? Are we gonna have to pay for server space directly to access it? Is Bungie gonna send it off with a bang and squeeze as much exit profit as possible while setting up the Destiny 3 gambit behind closed doors? I couldn't guess. I just hope they have enough supplies and reserves to give it one more chance of attempting to solidify the identity of the game and full sending it. Illusions and cheap tricks might not be enough this time. I do believe that if they stick to their old motto of making games that they want to play, then they'll probably earn a consistent player base back. Once that's rolling again, they need to desperately fix that onboarding system. Even if I shared my screen and walked a new player through the game, it's just taxing. I have to explain something like the Rose hand cannon is unobtainable except from Zur, who shows up on the weekends. And if he doesn't have it in his inventory, it's just unobtainable. It's easier to just say it's unobtainable. But no, don't leave. I promise the game is fun. You don't have to jump through that many. Okay, you do have to jump through a lot of hoops, but it is fun. And to the Sherpa, good luck not finding the straw that breaks the new player's back, despite so much content in the game feeling magical for that first playthrough. They have to comfortably make it to that point in the game first. Good luck getting them there. Alright, I think I talked enough. Let's finally answer, hey Cam, do you still find the game fun? I still find the game fun. Loot is easier to get than ever, new armor system has me trying wild fun combos, and I still have many long-term skill goals that I haven't hit yet. I'm pretty much just going to keep playing till the wheels fall off. Let's hope Bungie does good work with their backs against the wall. Thank you for listening, and be kind in the comment section.